does he do? He might go all the way. He gives it a wide. It's a chance. It'll be a goal. Wants me rolling through. He can. Come at the moment. Come at the champion.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Swans Blog, SwansCast. In this episode, I am joined by Myles Stedman, NEAFL journalist and also journalist for rugby.com.au. Myles, how are you?
Not too bad. Justin, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well. It was a bit of a disappointing end to the season because Sydney wasn't playing.
That's true. It's always a disappointing end to the season when Sydney aren't playing, and sometimes it's a disappointing end to the season when they are playing. So,
unfortunately, more disappointing recently.
Absolutely.
But look, we had the grand final on Saturday afternoon, and the entertainment was pretty big. They had the Killers this year, and by all reports, it was pretty good pre-game, during the game, and certainly after the game.
So it was. I'd go as far as to say they killed it.
Yes, and I think Riewoldt was the third person they've ever had come up on stage and sing a duet.
Truly, they're a bit stingy like that, are they?
Well, I think one player was they had a basketball or football player in America for one show, and then another one I think was it was Paul McCartney.
All right.
Or like a former Beatle or someone. And then now it's Jack Riewoldt.
Well, he gets to join an illustrious group, doesn't he?
He certainly does, and it looked like he was having a ball too. So
he was really going for it, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, and I will say that the way that the Richmond have sort of treated their win, it has been quite respectful, which I guess is in considerable stark contrast to how their fans generally behave during the season, and certainly during the finals. It's been a bit bizarre, actually. I think they're just in shock. We're waiting for the Tiger faithful to really come to the fore.
Yeah, they're definitely partying amongst themselves right now, aren't they? So if they could keep it that way for the next few weeks, that'd be great.
Yes, well, you just got to wonder if the Hawthorn 2014 or the Bulldogs 2016 or, even some of the other earlier teams will come to the fore in the way that the Tigers would behave. But here's to hoping that they stay classy. As the anchorman says, stay classy, San Diego.
Stay classy, Richmond.
Stay classy, Richmond, yes. Now, the grand final itself, it was... I don't know. It was disappointing, but it was a fair reflection on the finals itself. From my perspective, it looked pretty close for the first 10 minutes, and then it just went bleh. And it really was just Adelaide kicking those last two goals against the run of play that sort of kept them in the game. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's definitely it. And I think in terms of Adelaide's forward line, they had a few too many passengers.
Yes, definitely.
And that seemed to be the case the week before as well against Geelong. And I don't want to heap it on the guy just because he's been so good for most of the year, but Taylor Walker especially as the captain, he really wasn't as influential as some of those other guys that can creep up the ground and get some touches on the wing. So
you just wonder if maybe he was injured as well. Like he couldn't take a mark and he couldn't even beat Rance on a lead.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, isn't it? He looked much that way last week, the week before as well. Sort of immobile. So, but even Eddie Betts and Charlie Cameron weren't that influential either. So it was a pretty good defensive effort from Richmond.
Oh, it really was. And Cameron, he got a knock early on in the game. Looked like a pretty nasty corky to his calf. He still looked like their best player in the first quarter, limping around the ground. He was involved in everything.
It doesn't say much for them, does it? That a guy that was off for a good 5-10 minutes was still one of their best in the first half of the match.
Yeah, I know, and I think it was it Matt Crouch who racked up another 30 disposals?
Yes, and he and Rory Sloane were keeping Adelaide in it for the first, I guess, 20, 25 minutes of the match, and they did their best after that. But it was a pretty convincing disappearing performance, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. It was a full team effort in the end. It's
well put.
Yeah, look, there was a couple of good players. I thought, to be honest, the good players that can count on one hand. I thought Sloan was pretty good in the first half, so McCameron, but they fell away in the second half. Lever was decent throughout. Talia was okay, but even then, I mean, he didn't really have an opponent to match up on, so I thought Lever was good. I'm just trying to think actually who else.
I can't help you there. There's no one was really. I wouldn't say that anyone really won their matchup.
No, the Tigers smashed them all over the ground. They destroyed them in that second quarter.
Certainly did.
Look, there's discussion about the umpiring. Again, criticism. I don't think it's particularly fair. The reason why I don't think it's particularly fair criticism is because the umpiring really wasn't that bad. Sure, it was a little bit biased, but...
Yeah, but in the end, the Richmond won by, 40 points? 50 points?
No, 8 goals, 48 points.
Yeah, so you can hardly...
They probably should have won by more.
Yeah, so you can know. I wouldn't say that they have a leg to stand on, those that are criticising the umpire.
Yeah, and you're right. And the best way to put how the performance of the umpiring really was. It was inconsistent, and a little bit biased, but it wasn't as bad as it has been in recent years. I think there's a little bit of criticism about Eddie Betts when he didn't get that free kick late in the second quarter. And look, he was definitely being held. Could that have changed momentum? I don't know. But he should have got a free kick. And it goes down the other end, and the Richmond Tigers are getting free kicks for the slightest of all contact that you could possibly get.
Yeah, well, it's there's going to be goals like that in every match. So no, unless it's I wouldn't really look at the umpires that closely if matches decided by more than 10 points. To be honest.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And look, umpiring is always a favourite crotch for people to lean on, but in this case, it really had no influence. Adelaide was smashed all over the ground. 10 minutes into the first quarter, you could see it. You could see the game turning as soon as Richmond stopped Adelaide from scoring. They were just beating them across the ground, even in the first quarter. So,
yep.
Look, and then we had Dusty winning his second award or third award of the season. He's won the Coaches Association, the
Players Association.
Yes, and now the Brownlow. So that'd be his fourth award? The Norm Smith?
Yeah.
And now he's in line for his fifth, which is his best and fairest, which he's going to win that by a mile.
You'd imagine, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you'd be shocked if you lost that one. And there's a bit of discussion about whether or not he was best on ground. My thoughts was, I thought that he probably had the most impact on the ground. Whether or not he was the best, that's up for other people to debate. But I thought he was probably the most influential, certainly the last 2.5 quarters.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? It's kind of because I know everyone was talking about Batcher Hooley as another potential Norm Smith medalist. It's kind of like I guess a little a lot versus a lot a little. And and what I mean by that is that every touch of Dusty's was you can almost remember every single touch he had in the game because it was that groundbreaking and that game breaking where Hooley had about 25, 30 touches, and maybe about 15 of them were really influential. So it's I guess it's how you rate the game. And look, if Dusty wasn't there and Hooley wasn't there as well, you'd probably say that Dusty's touches were more influential. So, look, I didn't mind it, but personally I still would have given the medal to Hooley.
Yeah, and it's a tough one. Look, he had a sensational game, and you can't really argue that. But it's kind of one of those, toss of the coin. You can always go back to, I think it was 2006, when Judd got the Norm Smith over Brett Kirk, despite the fact that Brett Kirk
2005, was it?
Was it 2005? Yeah, it's
I think he got
2005, you're right.
Losing, yeah.
And Judd got in the losing grand final despite the fact that Kirk was by far the best player on the ground. And then in 2006, the same happened again. It's always one of those weird ones, to be honest. And some of the justifications by the panel, it's just odd. Some of them you just never really understand.
I guess it's also about how you you look at the phrasing of best on ground. Whether you take that to mean a literal the person that was in pretty much every contest, and that was Batcher Hooley, or the person who was, I guess, the best player on the grounds, if you will, and that was, I guess, probably Dustin Martin.
Yeah, look, I had him as probably having the most influence. Arguably, Rance was the best on in the first half, despite the fact he had, I think, 4 or 5 disposals. Yeah,
but I can remember every one of those clearly. So.
They were fantastic. As much as we hate him as a Swan supporter, he was unstoppable. He killed Adelaide almost single-handedly in that first half.
Well, Matthew Lloyd called him the best fullback of all time today. So it's a burning hot take from Lloydie, but he's getting up there, isn't he?
Yeah, he certainly is. It's always a weird one. Like, he's an attacking player, and he is susceptible to one-on-one contests where he can get beaten, which is where fullbacks typically are supposed to be strongest. So he's a bit more like a centre-half forward. Centre-half back, where you would normally defend someone in a lead or turn back to goal or something like that instead of out of the goal square. But the way he uses the ball is just incredible for a fullback. And I think he's probably the best fullback of maybe this century, which is basically the last, 17, 18 seasons.
Yeah, no, that's a big call, and I think you wouldn't want Matthew Scarlett to hear this podcast, but it's Rance is certainly building himself a case, isn't he?
Oh, he is, and Scarlett himself, he was a superb fullback. He's right up there and amongst the best of all time. So it's going to be a hard one, to be honest, where you fit them both in. I would think that if you could choose, you'd almost have... You still got to fit in that fella from Carlton, Silvani.
Yep.
Who's rated as the best ever fullback.
Stephen Silvani, not his son, yes. or his nephew.
No, it's definitely Stephen Silvani.
Yep, definitely Stephen.
Not the one at Fremantle. Is he still there?
No, one at Carlton. And the one at Carlton with the floppy hair and the long sleeves.
Who towed us up one game.
Yeah.
Much to our shock. But, look, there was a lot of Richmond players who could have even got the nod. Young fella Graham as well. He was... Norm Smith odds, he was 100-1 or something silly like that. And at one point in the third quarter, I was like, geez, I wish I put $5 on him. Because he was looking good.
But you wouldn't be pleased if he...
If he won it and you put all your money on someone else, you'd be a bit funky about it. But at the same time, look, they had so many contributors across the team, whereas Adelaide, they really just struggled. That's that. They lost by 48 points. They got smashed. They should have lost by more. And to be honest, that is that, I am afraid. So now that we've talked about the grand final, I sort of thought about this a bit on the day, and I know I talked about this on Twitter, and I put out there that I thought that Adelaide's performance was a bigger disappointment than Sydney's 2014 grand final.
You've definitely got a case there. Personally, obviously, it's not. But yeah, look, you've definitely got a case. It's hard to split them in terms of disappointment. I mean, you basically you're splitting hairs, really. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, look, it's not a conversation I always enjoy indulging, but I definitely see where you're coming from.
And again, the two teams raging hot favourites, minor premiers. They go into the grand final as overwhelming favourites and then just capitulate.
The only thing I'd say is that Sydney were coming up against a far more experienced, battle-hardened final side.
Absolutely.
And that's. But then again, Adelaide didn't have exactly a ton of finals experience to speak of either. So, there's a lot of different ways you can measure it.
Yeah, and look, the inevitable questions are, every single time a team wins a premiership, are they going to win a back-to-back? They're going to win a three-peat? Are they going to set up an ever-standing legacy, or are they going to go on to whatever it is that people call these days? What do you see Richmond's chances next year?
Well, interesting you ask. I actually tweeted this on the day and then deleted it about 30 seconds later. I got one reply. But I actually said that if you're a betting man, and I'm not, you wouldn't be that stupid to go and put some money on Richmond to miss the finals altogether next year. Because I think that the way the kind of parity that we're seeing in the AFL, it's a lot like Major League Baseball, in where it's really hard to build that consistency year after year, just because players are all really basically of the same skill set, and you really need a lot of luck to go your way, where even 10 years ago there was still a pretty fair divide between the very best and the very worst teams in the competition.
Yeah, agreed. And even just a couple of years ago, you had Hawthorn, Sydney, Adelaide, Geelong and Fremantle. Even Port Adelaide was kind of like thereabouts, but those were for about 3-4 seasons, those were your 5 best teams. And then your bottom 5 teams was GWS, Gold Coast, Carlton. They fell off after 2013. Collingwood, they came back in. Brisbane Lions and Essendon. And Richmond sort of sat a little bit above, but nowhere near the top 5. And I'll look at how they did this year. And to be honest, they could well have finished first if they didn't lose their close games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think anyone could have finished first for starters, but
except us.
Except us. And even we made a pretty good rub of it. But
yep.
I think it was, I don't want to incorrectly attribute the quote, but I think it might have been Grant Thomas, former St Kilda Saints head coach, who said that it was the worst group ever to win a flag. And for starters, I think that's really unnecessary.
I don't even know where to start with that tweet. I did respond to that, and I said, it's just Grant Thomas being a flog as usual.
Well, you're not wrong there. Granty, he was involved in a... Was he involved in a grand final? No, he wasn't.
No, he wasn't. He coached the the best team that St Kilda's ever had to 3 consecutive prelims.
You'd almost say he coached the best team to never win a grand final, or never even.
You're not going to find any arguments with that.
But either way, I think it's, for start, apart from being a really unnecessary thing to say post a grand final.
Yes, agreed.
I think he's going to be disappointed if he thinks he's going to be blown away by any of the next 5-10 premiers in terms of how damn good they are, because even Adelaide only finished top of the table by small margins. So look, I think the AFL's heading in that direction, where the best and the worst are getting closer together, and I think it's good for the league.
It is, and we've talked about it this year a couple of times about whether or not free agency and I guess more player movement freedom has improved the balance of the competition, and I think in a way it has, in a way it hasn't. So it's allowed players more freedom to move to other teams or just any team where they can get more opportunities. And it's allowed teams to cut one or more players at any one time, and then just bring in other players from other clubs who are either delisted or they're free agents or whatnot. But at the same time, some clubs have been able to concentrate players. Hawthorn, for example, they've been able to cut players and get a high concentration of free agent picks. And you kind of look at the way that Richmond's approached it. Sydney, to a certain extent, has approached it. Port Adelaide as well. Western Bulldogs, a little bit earlier on, they brought in a number of mature age players. And it's allowed those teams that were, perennial runners-up or perennial, finishing outside the finals, that sort of thing, to actually lift up and become more competitive. So...
Absolutely, and it does make for good storylines as well. I mean,
it certainly does.
Saw, Toby Nankervis, who played another contender for best on ground in the grand final.
He was great,
and Dion Prestia as well. So it's it's good to see where in years gone past, maybe a talented player would have missed his shot altogether. Now he's going to get that shot at another club.
Absolutely. Look, I think one thing we have to talk about is definitely Nankervis. And I know... I'm not sure if you read the article that Sarah Ollie wrote on Fox. I know we talked about this before the podcast, but I was a bit put out by the article title, and then some of the article content I thought was a bit misleading. But again, as I talked to you, I'm not too sure how much she might have written about that and how much that might have been sort of, copy edited or whatnot. But I think one thing we have to clear up is the fact that Nankervis was not delisted. He was not thrown away by the club. The club wanted to keep him. Fair and square. They said straight out, we want to keep this guy. And they tried to. They threw money at him. They threw money in years. And he just said, no, trade me to Richmond. So he got there.
He did get there, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
And yeah, look, it's something that you're always going to get in 2017 is half truths and mistruths in the media. So it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And I told you before the pod, I'm happy to see Toby do well at another club, just because you grow attached to these guys, and it's good to see them succeed, especially when it's not directly against Sydney.
Yes. Look, when we played against Richmond earlier this year, he got beaten pretty fair. But
He did.
And at the time, I was like, well, we don't really need him. But watching him play the way he did, and the way that he attacked the ball and the player when the ball was on the ground, it was really superb to watch. So all we can say is, well done, congratulations, very well done. And just I don't know. Some people are saying that Sam Jacobs won that matchup just by looking at his stats, some of his stats, and his hit-outs. But I think anyone who watched that game would agree that Nankervis towed him up.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that you say that, because statistics have for basically Ruckman. They're arguably the most misleading statistics in the game, because Ruckman these days do so much more than hit-outs, and even then, hit-outs to advantage you have to factor in. And Nankervis was so good across the ground, so good on the ground, whereas Jacobs, you only really, yes, his ruck work might have been better, but at the end of the day, was it to his team's advantage in terms of winning the match? Well, no, it wasn't. But was Nankervis's, I guess, lesser involvement more important? Yes, it probably was.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, Richmond played Daniel Rioli in the ruck. They played a bunch of other players. Sean Grigg for almost half a game. So they went small. They went really small.
You wouldn't
extra
even call
amount of
him
the contest.
A tall midfielder, would you? You'd call him a medium-sized midfielder.
And the thing is, as soon as the ball hit the ground, Jacobs was out of the contest.
Absolutely.
He's slow. He's not a tackler. He's just a very good tap ruckman. And it kind of relies on getting a good, clean centre clearance. But if he can't, that's it. The team's on the back foot.
Absolutely.
And look.
And you don't get that in grand finals.
No, you don't. You don't get any clean ball. It's always hard fought, contested, high pressure. And I kind of look at the way that Naismith and Sinclair play. As soon as the ball hits the ground, they're in there tackling. So some of Sinclair's best games that he's played, he's had upwards of 8 clearances to go with 4 or 5 tackles.
The St Kilda game?
Yeah, St Kilda game, he took 10 marks. What was it? 8 contested? Or something
he was
silly, I can't remember.
immense that game.
But even then, I think modern day ruck, they have to be able to do... They have to be another midfielder when the ball hits the ground.
Absolutely. You just you can't carry them around, can you? And
No.
and I think importantly they need to, especially when you look at Tom Boyd last year in the grand final, they need to be able to take a mark, and not only that, but the kick needs to be bloody good as well. So these days, I don't think you can, unless you're on a really fast track and have a great home ground advantage like the Adelaide Crows do. You can't afford to carry a Sam Jacobs into every single contest.
Yeah, exactly. And on that marking, we saw Nankervis go back in defence and take a couple of clutch marks. We saw him take some marks in the wing when they bombed it out. So his positioning was superb. To be honest, it was a bit like watching Dean Cox all over again.
It was, wasn't it? It was.
Not quite as good, but he had that influence on the game.
He did.
He was definitely among their top 6 players, and Sam Jacobs, I would say, was probably among their bottom 12.
No problems there.
Yeah. So, look, I think we'll wrap up the grand final, unless you would like to bring up anything else.
No, I didn't. Actually, the one thing I did see at the start of the match was, and it was on the broadcast, it wasn't my eagle eye or anything like that, was written on Daniel Rioli's wrist, on his wrist taping, was chase and tackle.
Yep.
And the broadcasters kind of sort of nodded at it, and it was like the first 5 minutes of the match, and that's exactly what we saw from Richmond for the entire match. So I just thought that was, they had a plan, they executed it brilliantly, and they're a great premiership side. Bloody good on them.
I agree. They deserve to win it. It wasn't like watching Geelong give Port Adelaide an absolute hiding in 2007, or Fremantle shoot themselves in the foot in, I think it was 2013, or just the boring 2015 grand final when everyone knew Hawthorn was going to win it. They would have to do something shocking to not win it.
Yeah.
It was, they definitely deserve to win it.
Absolutely.
But look, now on to some Swans-related news, considering we weren't in the grand final, unfortunately. We've had a bit of deck chair shuffling with the coaching recently. So some of the changes, we've got Stuart Dew, he's in the final 3 for the Gold Coast job. He is probably going to go to Gold Coast. My money's on Barker or Dew. And then we've got Josh Franco. I'm not quite sure if this is confirmed yet. He either has, or it's a very strong rumour, Port Adelaide. Henry Playfair's left to go to St Kilda, I think it is. Then we've got Shaw promoted from the NEAFL side into the assistant squad. My bet is he's going to take the defence. Ty Canelli's come back to the academy. Nick Davis has been promoted to, I think, like a manager position of the academy. Kirk will probably shift into the midfield role to take over, I think it's Franco. And then Steve Johnson is the new forwards coach. And his reputation precedes him as far as coaching goes. And in my opinion, I see him as probably the next senior coach, depending on what Blakey does. Your thoughts?
Yeah, wow. I'll start off on Steve Johnson there because you just mentioned him. That's a big rap. But yeah, look, GWS loved him. They didn't want to lose him coaching wise, but there just wasn't a position there. So,
which is a shock, really, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, when the arguably the best run organisation in the comp really wants to keep a guy, but they can't. I guess you have to go out and get him, don't you? So
yeah, pretty much.
And just in terms of how Richmond won the competition this year, like playing almost in entirely small forward line bar Jack, Steve Johnson's in that mould. So he's definitely going to help in terms of how we generate goals outside of Lance.
Yep.
So I think it's a great appointment. He's I'm not sure about his how he is with his communication skills, which I know the Swans are big on, but look, I can only assume that he's a great leader of men. I know Stephen Cornelio and a couple of the guys at GWS rate him really highly in terms of his leadership. So I think it's a great get.
Yeah, I think it is too. There was an article on the Geelong Cats website from the start of 2014, and it was the club just talking about how good he was on the field as a coach and the fact that he'd already done some of his coaching certificates. And this is still as a player 3 years before he retired. And going back even further, back to when the Cats were winning their premierships, when Mark Thompson was still coach, he was saying at the time, I think this is back in 2009, 2010, his football brain, he was so far ahead of everyone else on the field, he knew what was happening before it was happening.
Yeah, he doesn't strike you as that way initially, but he's a real football nerd. So yeah, it's going to be great for our forward line.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which needs work. So yeah, look, I wouldn't half mind if he suited up for the Swans for about 6 or 7 games next year, let alone coach them. So
play him out of the goal square. That's about it.
Exactly. Happy to have him.
Yeah, look, I think it's a superb appointment. It's definitely the appointment we needed, and look, I like to thank Henry Playfair for his 10 years of service.
Yep, absolutely.
He did a decent job on the forwards, and he did a decent job on the defence. He certainly was responsible for, as far as coaching goes, for ensuring that the Swans had a rock solid defence. So you could never sort of knock him for that. I think he was a bit maligned during his time because as a career, he was pretty much maligned as a forward. He'd never really had much of a career. He didn't even crack the 100 games. So,
but it really, and sometimes fans find this hard to comprehend, even when it's right in their faces. But sometimes it's the guys that didn't really have that spectacular career that are really good communication-wise and tactically. Yes. They might not have been the most talented guys out there, but the way they eked out their 50 or 75 games was through being fantastic communicators, and
yes,
and that's so important on an AFL field, on such a big playing arena, to be a good communicator. And that's and I know for a fact that the Swans are really big on that in their coaching ranks. So
yep,
that's Henry up and down. So yeah, I'd like to thank him as well for his 10 plus years with the club.
Well, another one that I forgot to mention is Jeremy Laidler. Now, he's a new academy coach, and the club hasn't really published whether or not he's gone through his coaching course, but he was certainly been involved with the academy squad the last year, and the feedback has been that he's been superb with the academy crew. And then you got Jared McVeigh, who will most likely retire at the end of next season, and he will probably step into a coaching role as well. So there's a lot of intelligent high football IQ people sticking around the club, which I think is absolutely superb.
Absolutely, and just because you brought it up, I'd like to touch on what a smart guy Jeremy Laidler is. I've had a little bit of dealing with him in my my time reporting on the NEAFL, and he's such a smart dude. Really surprised me, actually. He's one of the older guys out there playing NEAFL, but he's always he's without fail always first to the ball. He's always the first guy to anticipate it's going to land. He's so smart. So yeah, I think he'll be brilliant for those 16 and 17 and 18-year-old kids in the academy.
Absolutely, and even as his career went, you could see the way that he read the ball. He was a superb intercept player, and he could always read where the ball was going to go. Yeah, and he was rarely beaten in the contest as well, or at least in the air. So
absolutely, and he's not a great athlete, but it says so much that he's still beating people up to this day when he's probably 5 or 10 years slower than everyone else on the pitch.
Yeah, exactly. So, look, footballers go. I thought he was a superb pickup for the Swans. Thank you very much, Malthouse. No idea what you were doing back when you came on board, but thank you. That was your one true legacy, just cutting your team, just cut. But look, there's a bit of deck chair shuffling going on at the Swans. It's going to be interesting, and look, it's going to be a pretty crazy trade season coming up as well. There's a lot of rumours flying at the moment. We've got the Tippett and Watts kind of discussion going on. Do we or don't we go for Tippett? And, what happens with him? Do we or don't we go for Watts? And does he come in for Tippett? And, there's a little bit of Myles, but I don't think the Swans are actually going to bite on Myles. So what's your sort of read on the Watts-Tippett situation?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think and I've said this pretty much every chance I get, is that I think the biggest barrier to the Kurt Tippett thing is that he's just getting paid so much, and it'll probably require us eating a little bit of that to actually get the trade across the line. And I really don't see that as happening just in terms of how Sydney work, list management wise. In terms of Watts, I think he'd be an okay get. Obviously, it all depends on the price. It always does with these deals. But he's good all over the ground. He can be used up forward, down back, midfield, and even in the ruck we saw him a little bit pinch hitting there this year. So he's not ever going to be the consistent guy that probably everyone wants him to be. But I think price willing, he would be a good get.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. My perspective on Watts is, you kind of look at Tippett as well, and you ask, can we play Tippett and Watts in the same team? And my answer is no.
No way.
And you can even say, can we play Watts and Reid in the same team? And the answer is,
Yeah, it really is, isn't it?
It is. There's going to have to be some positional changes, and some players are going to have to get cut. And it's not a wage thing. I just think structurally things have to change. The one thing that I think the Swans have gone for the last couple of years is they've gone too much on the youth and too much on having a lot of variety and flexibility across the field. So some players are playing 6, 7, 8 positions during a game. They're swapping roles every 20 minutes. And maybe that's what the modern game needs. But at the same time, do the Swans really need Sam Reid going forward, back, ruck, forward, back, constantly throughout a game? And we could see him against the Cats. He was pretty much useless against the Cats. He wasn't even arguably the worst on the ground. He was the worst on the ground, and by some margin too, and he couldn't even work himself into the game.
Sam's biggest problem is that, and it's unfortunately for the guy. I love the guy, but unfortunately for him, it's getting worse, and it's only going to get worse as the game gets more mobile. And that's that. As soon as the ball's on the ground, he's basically out of play.
Yes,
and that's not the case with Jack Watts, who is almost the same player, except he's so much more mobile. He's a deceptively good athlete.
He is, yes.
He can run the ball. Sam can't. So I guess Sam's style of play is really dating really quickly, and it showed in spades against Geelong.
It is, and he's still valuable. There is no question about that.
No, of course.
And I still see him as a lead-up player. However, he's never going to develop as a centre-half back. He's going to have to be a swing player like that. So where I see Watts fitting in, and this is what I wrote about on the blog, is I see Watts, I would basically play Watts on the wing. I would play him as just a really tall wingman. Because he can go back, he can intercept. Coming out of defence, he can carry the ball, as he said. His disposal in general is superb. So, and below his knees, he's a great footballer. So there isn't much, wrong there.
Yep, and I get that 100%. And it frees, especially when and let's say Watts does come to Sydney, he will play on the wing at least some of the time. And when that happens, that frees Buddy to go back up forward and play as a lead-up guy. And no, we don't want him to be doing that all the time. but against some teams, we definitely want him to be doing that. And I think having that big versatile guy on the wing that we just otherwise don't have will free Buddy to do so much great stuff out of the goal square. And we all remember when he was playing for Hawthorn and kicked that 13 goals, he barely was barely sighted outside the 50. So
yeah, exactly. And some of his best football is basically playing out of the 50.
Yeah.
And the Swans, they tried to do that against the Cats, but that game was awful. But and another thing where I see Watts fitting in is if the Swans need to change up their forward presence, or at least the way they present, then Watts can go to full forward. And then Franklin can play further up the ground, centre half forward, and Reid can switch to centre half back or just a loose in defence. And you still have height, you still have plenty of pace in the forward line, and you still have a target. Most importantly, you still have a target in the forward line.
And if the roles are reversed and it was Sam up forward and Lance up on the wing, again, as soon as that ball comes to ground, it's going to be the defender that's going to win the contest. With Jack, that's not the case.
Yes, exactly. I think Jack is a better contested mark, but it's not so much do we swap Watts with Reid because we re-sign Reid. I still think we need Reid. However, it comes down to Tippett. That's the ultimate point.
It really does, doesn't it?
It does. And if the Swans go after Watts, either Tippett languishes in the reserves because honestly, I don't see him getting back in as a ruck. Even if he fixes his ankle, I think he's done. It's just as a full forward, and he's going to have to push out Sinclair. He'd have to push out Watts, and he'd have to push out Franklin. So, and even Reid.
And the scary thing about Kurt was that even in the NEAFL, the back half of the year, he was getting outplayed by his opposite man. He's just so scarily low on confidence. It's really quite bizarre. I mean, there were even in that I can't remember which game it was, but it was one against one of the NEAFL AFL sides. There were
might have been the GWS game. Are you talking at the end, or are you talking around about the middle part?
Definitely at the end. There were like string bean academy guys.
GWS
that were beating him just for pace, and he just looks exactly like what he is, and that's a player with no confidence.
Yeah, he does. And the thing is, when he's up and running, he's a scary good player.
Of course.
But he's up and running. He had a patch in 2013 where he was, let's not mince words, he was superb in 2013.
Yeah, we're talking 5 years ago now.
5 years ago. That's the problem. And then he had a really good 6 to 8 game patch at the start of 2016 before he really screwed up his leg. So, look, Tippett's come in for a bit of criticism, even on the podcast over the year, and there's been a bit of Tippett bashing, but this isn't to bash Tippett. This is simply, if we have one, the other one must go. There isn't enough room in this town for both of them. Yeah,
he definitely keeps me up at night, Kurt.
I hope for the right reasons, not the wrong reasons. He's not creeping through your window, is he?
No, he's not. He's not.
Now, let's have a quick look over the free agent list. Now, I'm going to rattle off some names, and I'd like you to give me one or two quick thoughts on them. Now, Clay Beams is unrestricted at the Brisbane Lions. What do you think?
No point.
No, I don't mean in Sydney. Do you think he'll stay?
Yeah, look, he's it's an interesting one. I don't think he will, actually. He captained the NEAFL side this year. I think it was him.
Yeah, it was him in the NEAFL, yes, in the grand final.
No, 100% he's gone. If what I've heard from some of the Brisbane Lions brass is true, he's no longer.
Well, it's backfired big time for Dane then, hasn't it?
Hasn't it just?
He's gone up there and he's just been almost permanently injured since. It's a bit of a disappointing end, really. But
I was at pre-match the NEAFL grand final down on the ground. So I overheard someone say it's kind of ironic that the captains were posing with the cup. It's kind of ironic that it's the two NEAFL captains, and they're neither of them are going to be at the club next year.
Yeah, exactly.
That being, of course, Brandon and Clay Beams.
Clay, yeah, exactly. And look, Brandon Jack, after he couldn't get back in the side, he was always going to get cut. There was no question about it.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Tom Rockcliffe, he's got a lot of interest in Melbourne at the moment.
Yeah,
he's a restricted one, by the way.
No, either way for me, Tom Rockcliffe's gone. He seems to be. He was interested in leaving a long time ago, and for me that always raises red flags. That the next time that a potential move comes along, he's pretty much going to take it, and he's too good in the contested ball to be playing for a side like Brisbane, who are he's got to be playing. He's almost like a Josh Kennedy light almost.
Well, I think Essendon or St Kilda or Carlton are looking into him, but I'll throw you up another one. How about Zach Clark from Fremantle? He's unrestricted.
He's suffered from the problem of being the other ruckman besides Aaron Sandilands. So I wouldn't half mind Sydney giving him a little look, but I think he's every chance to play on at another club. But even if Fremantle want to keep him, because we don't know how much longer Aaron Sandlands has left. Every match could be his last. So
but even then, he struggled to get games this year anyway. So
yeah, I haven't paid super close attention to Fremantle. So for all we know, he could be no good. But he's played some good games in the past.
Apparently, he hasn't played this year. That's the reason why we haven't seen him. After undergoing 2 operations on his left patella bone.
Right, so for a big man, that's
bad.
No good. Yeah.
No, so he might not get a crack anywhere else.
No, I don't want to look at him.
There's Ben Howlett at Essendon. He's unrestricted. I don't know if he played much this season, but he couldn't re-establish himself after the wider ban. And then,
No, Sydney Uni next year.
No, I would be surprised if he's actually on any AFL list.
Yep.
Nick Subban's, I guess it's a little bit of a surprise that he's entered as a unrestricted free agent, that Fremantle are kind of going to let him go.
Yeah, maybe. I guess he's a little bit old for what they're doing in Fremantle. Might get another look in the preseason draft if the draft doesn't shore up everyone else's list. That's usually how that kind of things work. So if not, he'll probably also be at Sydney Uni.
Yeah, it's a very good chance as well. Daniel Menzel from Geelong, he's unrestricted. This would be disappointing if he left Geelong, but
yeah, I'd be surprised to see him leave. Just for the same reason that I'd be surprised to see AJ leave us. Just for the point that the club has put so much work and you really don't understand how much money goes into these players that are injured for that long. So on that point alone, I'd be surprised to see Geelong let him go.
Do you think that maybe he might get delisted and rookied again?
Good question. I don't know. He was good this year, so it's it's kind of a strange fall from grace. But that's always a chance, isn't it?
It is. The risk is obviously that if Geelong delist him, that someone else picks him up in the rookie draft before them. And
if I haven't seen the rookie draft order, but if we were before them, I'd 100%
we're
take him.
Definitely before them.
Then I'd absolutely take him.
Well, they finished higher on the ladder, so they're after us, which is good.
Right, of course. Sorry.
Then, of course, Motlop, he's restricted, and apparently he's been over the Port Adelaide, and Port Adelaide are trying to court him, and there's been a little bit of discussion whether or not the Swans should chase him. And look, my thought and my read on this is if we could get him at a good cost without bending over backwards, I would entertain it, but the contract might be a bit difficult.
Yeah, you've covered costs there, so I'll leave that alone because that's obviously important. But the strangest thing about Motlop for me is that he's always been that guy that just has always either been out of shape or hasn't been working hard enough or whatever.
Yeah.
Just basically Lewis Jetta 2.0.
But worse, yeah.
Yeah, but worse. In that he doesn't have enough strings to his bow. That said, he almost looked like the only cat that was trying in that loss to Adelaide. So it's like
Yeah, he had a good final series too.
Yeah. So maybe he's turned a corner. Maybe he hasn't. He still looks a little chunky. So
Someone ate the donuts.
Yeah. So look, price depending. I'd definitely consider it because at his best, he's at his best he's a motlop.
Well, he's definitely a motlop.
Of course, referring to Daniel at his best.
Oh yes, of course.
Yes. He's definitely a motlop.
Yeah, he's. Definitely agree that at his best, he is one of the best line-breaking players in the league, and the things that he can do, it's right up there with what Cyril Rioli can do.
Yep, 100%.
It's just, can he get that consistency together? Can he get the application there? There's too many ifs. There's nowhere near enough consistency. So his demand on the market, I reckon he will be saying 600 to 700. That's what he'd be asking for. But his value is not even close to that. It's more like probably 400 to 450, just based on what he's actually done. Can
I go a super hot take here?
Yeah.
How about us trading Kurt Tippett to Geelong for Stephen Motlop, because it's almost a direct needs-based swap.
Yes, I don't disagree with that because Geelong have only got Hawkins.
Exactly.
And they're actually looking to cut Reece Stanley as well. So as far as forward line goes, if they lose Menzel, they've just got Hawkins. So maybe that's what they want to do, play Dangerfield at full forward or something. But that is something that I would entertain. But then I think we also need to make sure that we trade with 2018 in mind because we need to secure Blakey.
Yes, so, that's true.
On that, we'll go to look at some of the questions from our followers. And we've got a couple of good ones. So Josh from Facebook, he asks, should we persist with 2 ruckmen or finally bite the bullet and go with 1 and a pinch hit? Back up.
Well, Josh, it'd be lovely to be able to only go with 1 ruckman if one stands out. I think is the caveat there. And yep. I think Callum Sinclair is the key here because he's clearly the highest ceiling ruckman on our list, in my opinion. He can obviously play up forward as well, and he's big and tall, and he's got a mark as well. And
yep.
So, and that's what the best ruckmans are like these days. So, I think it starts and ends with him. If his tap work can get better, he can potentially be Sydney's unequivocal number 1 ruckman.
Yes,
but yeah,
agreed.
Look, it's less of a bite the bullet and just do it thing, and more of a can someone please make that position their own?
Yes. Look, I agree 100%. And look, the thing is, Naismith is at the moment the out and out best, just pure ruckman in the team.
Oh yeah, tap ruckman for sure. Sorry, I shouldn't have misrepresented myself there.
No, it's fine because I like what you're saying about Sinclair. Once the ball hits the ground, he is the best tall midfielder out of the 4 ruckmen in the squad. He's far better than Naismith or Tippett once it's on the ground. He wins clearances, he gets tackles, he does all that. He can go forward and he can take marks and kick goals. None of the other ruckmen in the squad can do that, at least consistently.
Yeah.
So for all the crap that he sort of got from the semi-final loss, he certainly wasn't alone in having a down game.
No, he wasn't.
He certainly wasn't the only one from having the complete opposite of leather poisoning. So, so basically, he was far from the worst. I'm not sold on whether or not he can be the single ruckman. I think he's better as a forward, but again, it depends on what the team does. If we go for Watts, then we lose Tippett, so then it basically becomes Sinclair versus Naismith. Who can offer more? No, I think it becomes Sinclair. And then you have someone like Towers pinch hitting, even Watts pinch hitting, Reid pinch hitting. Agree, it's not so much bite the bullet, it's just, can the real Slim Shady stand up?
Yeah, can someone please stand out?
Yes, exactly.
And to that point, I just wanted to give a little shout out to Darcy Cameron, who is a NEAFL ruckman. He's also the holder of a few NEAFL records as of this year for headouts. He is a splendid young talent. If he comes along, he's every chance to play a few senior games next year. But that's a little bit off in the distance. But he's brilliant talent.
Look, he had a lot of hard luck too. He had 2 serious shoulder injuries. The second one requiring a shoulder reconstruction. But in the JLT, he showed a lot. He really did show a lot.
Yeah, he's really good.
And at one point, Sinclair was 4th choice, and it really came down to who was going to be fit enough to play with Naismith or Tippett. Actually, it was Tippett, sorry. Who was going to be fit enough out of those two to play with Tippett when the season started? And it just basically came down to Sinclair. It was the only 2 fit ruckmen left.
Yep.
Look, John from Facebook, he's got the next question. Should Lockett and Kirk play a greater coaching role in a 2018 season? And I'll just go quickly on that one. So Lockett, I think he's going to remain part-time. I think it's just once a week. He comes in and does some forward work.
Yep.
And Kirk, he's going to be the midfield coach. He's certainly not being promoted to a senior assistant. He's just still an assistant coach. And what are your thoughts on that?
Look, I don't have a whole heap to add there, apart from reinforcing that for the Swans, communication is key when it comes to coaching. And Brett Kirk's he's a genius. That guy. He's a brilliant speaker. He's brilliant with the young ones. So he's definitely. I think he should definitely play a larger role. Of course, as you said, he's not the senior assistant. And look, I think Tony will be happy just keeping the club at arm's length like he has the past 20 years. But no, of course he's valuable to have there as well. He's the greatest full forward of all time, so can't hurt.
Yeah, he is. And people still argue, but he's definitely the greatest full forward of all time. Now, John from Facebook, look, he asked a few of these questions. I had to trim some of them down, but now he's asking, is it more important to focus on the forward line this trade period, or should we look to recruit more defence and midfield? Now, I think forward line, definitely. Maybe a bit of a question mark over defence because we're going to lose a couple of players in the off-season. We've already lost Talia. He's gone. So what do you think?
Look, I think defence and midfield are fine. We have some good young defenders down back. Of course, Aliir, if he gets his head right, he's going to be there next year playing 20-odd games.
Yes, definitely agree with that.
Some guys like Jack Mybaum. He's good.
Yes.
Alex Johnson will be back, so I think defence will be fine. Midfield should be fine as well. Jordan Dawson will play some AFL next year. He's good young talent.
I'd be shocked if he doesn't even play in the first round, to be honest.
Oh, yeah, he'll play. Yeah, he'll definitely be round one. Oliver Florent, he was towards the end of that even at NEAFL Grand Final, he was a class above. So he'll play a lot more next year as well. Forward line, the cupboard's a lot more bare. So in answer to your question, John, yes, we do need to focus on the forward line.
Definitely need to focus. And there isn't, apart from at the moment, key position depth, it's almost non-existent. That's the case with a lot of clubs. Let's not mince words. But with Tippett going down, we really don't have another tall forward that can just anchor the forward line. Sinclair's not a wrestler; he's a leading player. Same with Franklin. So it's kind of like Sydney have always gone tall in the forward line, but they've always had a pretty reliable, fit person to play full forward. So the next question from John: should we continue to reinvigorate our side with younger stars in 2018 and beyond? Or should we scrap that culture and recruit more experienced players? Now, I just want to jump in there real quick. We are picking up Nick Blakey next year, and we have to make sure that we trade future picks this year.
We have to pick up Nick Blakey next year.
Because some scumbag club Paul Roos, I'm looking at you and your crappy maneuver at Melbourne. Some scumbag club is going to go top 5. We're taking you. Pay up, Sydney.
Yep.
There is no question whatsoever. He is a super talent. Even this year, he is. Yeah, no,
he's. I saw him a little bit battle against men in the Sydney AFL, and he's a class above. In terms of the question, I don't think there's any hard and fast rule in terms of either scrapping the culture or sticking with it. Just going to do what's best for the club. That's do both at the same time, and you can do both at the same time. And I guess just on that question before as well, it's important to keep in mind that James Rose kicked 50 goals in the NEAFL this year as a small forward. So he'll play more AFL. Ollie Florent will play more AFL. But at that rate, the best clubs they do utilise free agency in the draft and the trade period well, like Richmond did last year. So we need to focus on that as well.
And on that, Danielle from Facebook asks, which players, if any, should we target in the free agency or trade period?
Good question. As I said, if we can, if Geelong have the balls to delist Daniel Menzel, we'll definitely take him.
And even Motlop as well.
yeah. If they want to, please go ahead.
Yeah, delist, chop.
I did have a little look down that free agency list, and in the terms of restricted, unrestricted, what everyone will want, the only one that really jumped out to me there is Taylor Duray.
Yes, I was thinking of that too.
Why I say that is that he was good in a super Hawthorn team, and he disappeared a little this year. But just on the fact that he was good in a good team, I want him at my club.
I think also with the way that Burton, O'Brien, and a bunch of those other Hawthorn defenders emerged, I think he was just kind of unlucky enough to be out of the side when they came through, when they finally started clicking.
Few too many years older than them, hey.
And it's just luck. Sometimes it just comes down to dumb luck as to how players come through. So Taylor Duray, if he was available and we didn't have to give up anything for him, and no one picked him up, pick him up. He's not going to cost you much, and he's good depth.
100%.
And he'd probably even start, to be honest. So
I imagine you would.
For Daniel's question, and even going back to John's question, I think given the youth of the side, it's probably worthwhile investing in some more experienced players. Not necessarily older, but more experienced players. I think at times the team's kind of fallen over when it's come down to inexperience. So, Papley, he's not terribly experienced. Reed's not terribly experienced. Rowan's not terribly experienced, despite the fact that Reed and Rowan have been in the system nearly 10 years. Jones, Myles, Heaney, Aaliyah, just trying to think who else, Hewitt as well. Hayward, Florence played like 8 games or something. Hayward's played 20. Towers hasn't even played 50. And we're going to cut about 900 to 1,000 games of experience in the next couple of years anyway. So, I think we need to look to the future.
The one thing I would say about this whole trading thing, and it's kind of new to the AFL in terms of unrestricted free agency and actually trading players for players. It's kind of new to the AFL, so people are sort of unsure with it. But the one thing I'd say about it is, from observing what the good teams do, opportunities pop up throughout the trade period, like just randomly pop up, like the Toby Nankervis one.
Yes. Yeah.
The Josh Caddy one, the Dion Steer one. They all pop up, and what the really best teams do, and best football departments like Neil Baum at Richmond and Geelong when he was there, is that they take advantage of that opportunity that pops up to get a guy probably below market value. I can't remember exactly what they got all those guys for, but
nothing. And even Josh Caddy's on small money as it is.
That's it. So we need to, maybe it's less about being less about a cavalier nature and going out and wheeling and dealing, and more about sitting back and kind of holding the chips and see what pops up during the 2 weeks, and then trying to play that, as opposed to going balls deep right from the start. And
you can look back to Mumford. Mumford was a good capture.
Exactly.
Kennedy and McGlynn
that just popped up on the spot. They all popped
Kennedy
up
and McGlynn were from left field. They were basically, who are they? Oh, okay. Then we kind of know who they are. Oh,
precisely.
Geez, that's all right.
They all became available week of or week before the trade period, and that was when that's when the best sides do their work, is pretty much right in the thick of the thing.
Yeah, I agree, and I suspect that this year there are going to be teams that will make changes, and they're going to, or players are going to request trades
100%.
on the eve or during.
Happens.
Yes,
it always happens.
I would be surprised if at least a couple of well-known players haven't requested trades by Wednesday. I'd be shocked. Last year, we didn't have any big names that did. We had Nankervis who said, please trade me, but that was always coming because he hadn't signed on. Xavier Richards as well. He asked to be traded. And Dean Towers. Dean Towers didn't really ask to be traded. He just dabbled to see what was going on and then signed on.
And that's such a Dean Towers play. He's kind of semi-confident on the field, and he was kind of semi-confident in the trade market.
Just to sort of play the market. All right, no, nothing's biting. All right, I'll sign. No worries. Right. I'll keep my career going.
That's it, isn't it?
So, look, it's going to be interesting. And as far as the trade period goes, on Friday, we are going to be back for another podcast. We're going to do a live podcast leading up to the Bob Skilton medal count. So we won't do the podcast during the middle to latter stages, but we're certainly going to do it in the earlier stages, and we will discuss anything that has happened during this week regards to trades and whatnot, and anything from the free agency trade window, which opens, I believe, tomorrow or Wednesday. Really? Yeah, so it opens this week. So there's a lot happening. Really looking forward to it. It actually closes next Thursday or Friday.
Brilliant. Good news.
Can't remember the exact dates, but it's going to happen. So really looking forward to it. And look, Myles, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Been a pleasure being on. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Look, and remember, guys, you can always follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram with the tag The Swans Blog, and you can always leave us your comments and questions anytime on social media using the hashtag SwansCast. Now, as discussed last week, we will be back during the off-season, so this won't be the last podcast. Just a heads up, again, on Friday, before the Bob Skilton medal count, we are going to do a live podcast next week on Wednesday the 11th. Then we're going to do a podcast a week later for our trade period wrap, and another one 2 weeks after. And we'll let you know what's going on with more content and more podcasts later on. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It's been a pleasure. 2017's done. Onwards to the silly season. Go Swans.